So now I'm visible.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So you have told us that the classical school of management in is just about the man. We just took man as an another input, but in the human relation school, we have more focus on the needs related to the human beings. That is the psychological and other needs which were represented in the Maslow's need hierarchy theory. So when we come to the management science school, it is basically a outcome of the Second World War. Like we can put a conclusion between or the by the concept of the difference between the World War First and World War Second, such that in World War First it was all about the manpower or the bravery, personal combats of the people who were involved in the war. For example, if someone who have more power or who can more courageous can win the war, but in the World War Second it was all about the technological plans that were based on the techniques, and it is highly sophisticated use of the uh, innovations and like management techniques in. And as a result of that, it was a situation in which many experts many operational research experts and other physicists also get beaten by the technical experts of the period. For example, and for explaining this concept, you have given us the example related to the complaints regarding the lift issues in a building. So in the building there were a issue related to the complaints that people have to wait in a queue, or people have to wait for a certain time period to get the lift. So in that case many people have given the opportunity to give their solutions. So some had suggested that we should increase the number of lifts, or we should increase the speed of the lift. But when it comes to the watchman, someone asks the watchman or the lift or the person who manages the lift that what should be the proposed solution for this problem. So he suggested that you should only put mirror, a long size mirror in front of the lift. So when the people or when all of them agree to what the lift man has said, the problem has solved, the number of complaints reduced to zero. So it only depends on the psychology of the person. So management science puts a focus on techniques, but one should also take care of the certain psychologicals as it is related with human being. So next example which you provided us is the bank example, that on the salary days you have given the example of SBI medical loan branch in which there is a long queues and a rush on the salary days. So in on the salary days the bank should expect a number of customers, a very huge number of customers, and for reducing the problem they should like prepare in advance the plan that how they want to arrange the things in a proper order. Like no customer should wait for more than 3 minutes in on their counter, so they should prepare their plan like they should make they should arrange the proper number of counters which would avoid these queues. And in addition to that, you have also said that many institutions have used this quantitative base as a pride. Like the IIM Calcutta, they have used this as a pride that they have a very good quantitative base for their decision making. Some of their pass outs and also the academicians, they have also used it that they as their distinction that they have a very good quantitative base for the decision making. So we can conclude that quantitative data decision making is all about a very good quantitative database, and taking and putting all variables into a good equations which would provide various solutions for the problems. And there is one more tool which has provided a very good uh, provided a very good help to this approach, which is the computer. That is the time when this approach is introduced. This is the same phase when the computers came into the existence. So computers have also played a very important role in helping the condition, as they there were a lot of crunches, and for reducing the job of those crunches, computers have played a very important role. Then after this, there are certain limitations of the management science school. First is they have given more power to the person who made the content, which leads to cleavage between the tool maker and the tool user. So, which I can explain in the way that the tool, sometimes a technique is developed, it is irrespective of the way how the person who is the user of the technique wants to use it, which sometimes leads to a threat in the mind of the technique user that maybe this technique can overpower his own qualities or own suggestions. The second is also that not as a we can use any technique, but the master should always be a human being, so there should be always a disagreement between the two. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Anamika. So let me comment on the presentations that we have had in the introduction round. And Deepa and Zishan started and they presented their profile. Now, I think people who come from small towns, they have their own advantages. And yes, they have some issues also that they need to handle. For example, often language is the key issue which they need to work on. So Deepa has had a good career, academic career, and she has excelled as a student. That is credible. And often our lack of confidence, many of us have that because of lack of exposure that many of us have in small towns. So maybe this exposure to our MBA class, wish we were meeting offline, then it would have been even better. But use this period to excel, especially on language front. And I hope this doubt that you have about your own potential, although you should not doubt because you have excelled in the main aspect of your performance, that is academics. So if you have done well on that account, I hope you will do well on other accounts also. And generally, I mean, there have been a research on um, when this Taj hotel was attacked, and there was a research conducted by Harvard Business Review how Taj hotel staff handled it so effectively. And one of the finding was that most of the people who were working there, they came from small towns, and they had some basic values which they brought to work. Like, for example, even in those trying circumstances, nobody ran away from the situation and they faced it and they saved the lives of the guests who were, there in their custody at that point of time. So you have your own advantages, but work on these exposure related things. Language is one part of it, and I hope you will do well, inshallah. Now coming to Zishan, I think again your issue is also related to lack of confidence and slightly underplaying with your strengths. Okay. So it's just a question of looking at things as glass half empty or half full. You can argue it the other way around also. You have had exposure to work situations. You only need to, again, in your case also, the key problem was articulation. And for that, what I have been suggesting, that it's always better to, especially in the initial stage, to write your text. If I need to prompt, okay, you have not covered this part, you have not covered this part, it is an indication that maybe you have not perused the aspects that were to be covered. The structure was well laid out right in the beginning, that you were supposed to share your background. Then, how do you see yourself as a person? Then, what have been your achievements? What have been your now your career aspirations, life aspirations? So sometimes we blame the circumstances, but often if we go into the course, we have not applied ourselves fully to the job. So it is for you to assess how prepared you were for your introduction.
Sir, I will try next time better and
Yes.
give better results.
So this excellence orientation, where we have this, in us, that if I've got an opportunity, I'll make most of it, and whatever I have to do for that, I will do it. Lakesh, there is some disturbance at your end. Can you please unmute yourself? So I hope all of us have heard that simple example, that when we point fingers towards others, that is outside, at least three fingers are pointing towards us. So it's better to look inward and see what I could have done extra to make a mark. And this is my general comment to all of you who are going to present. Don't philosophize in your introduction. Like, for example, I want to be with myself because a person should spend time with himself or herself. It's not like that. You say, I enjoy my periods of solitude. That's all.
Sir, but every time it could not be the happiness, the people say.
Pardon?
Sir, sir, actually my communication is quite weak. मैं थोड़ा सा हिंदी में बोल दूँ.
हाँ, बताइए.
मैं कहना चाहता हूँ सर, हर बार यही नहीं होता है कि आदमी यानी कोई खुशी की चीज़ शेयर कर रहा है अपने साथ, या यानी कोई ऐसा काम कर रहा है जो उसे अकेले में नहीं करना चाहिए। बहुत सी चीज़ें होती हैं, जैसे आदमी
मैं ये
पढ़ाई।
नहीं कह रहा हूँ, मैं ये नहीं, आपसे बिल्कुल मैंने नहीं कहा कि वी शुड नॉट highlight is highlight it as a strength of our personality or describing our personality. If we enjoy our periods of solitude, we must mention it. लेकिन उसमें फिर एक स्टेज जब हम आगे बढ़ जाते हैं कि हम उसको एक दूसरे को ज्ञान बांटने लगते हैं कि हमें जो है हर शख्स को अपने साथ, अपने आप के साथ वक्त गुजारना चाहिए, उससे ये फायदा होता है, उससे यहाँ हम वी बिकम मोर टीचर लाइक, कि दूसरे को मॉरलाइज करने लगे.
सर मैं खुद ही नहीं हूँ मोरलाइज़, दूसरे को क्या करूँगा?
आपने जो जिस तरह से अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस किया, मैं उसके बारे में बात कर रहा
सॉरी सर, मैं अगली बार ध्यान नेक्स्ट।
हूँ. तो फॉर ऑल ऑफ अस, दिस इज माय जनरल सजेशन, डोंट फिलोसोफाइज अननेसेसरी. आप ये कहिए कि आई एम ए हार्ड वर्किंग पर्सन, जैसे दीपा ने कहा, आई एम ए हार्ड वर्किंग पर्सन. अब उसके बाद ये भी बताने लगे कि सब हार्ड वर्क से ही जिंदगी में कामयाबी मिलती है, और अगर हम लोग हार्ड वर्क नहीं करेंगे तो कैसे कामयाब होंगे. अब ये हम अननेसेसरीली आगे बढ़े चले. दिस इज व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. यू से आई एम ए हार्ड वर्किंग पर्सन whom you are educating. मुझे एजुकेट कर रहे हैं आपके One should spend time with himself. That is my point. I enjoy spending time with myself. That's a fair enough proposition. लेकिन दूसरे को ज्ञान बांटने की जरूरत नहीं है. When you are introducing yourself, that is my point.
जी सर।
दूसरी एक और चीज, अब let us come to the recap. And unfortunately, in online mode, we do not have enough opportunities to, look at the other side of the personality, which is the visible part of our personality, which is evident to others. But even in the online, this is evident from many of our gestures or the way we take care of our things. Like, for example, if somebody is not ready to open his video when he is making a presentation, is he really prepared for the job? What impression I'll gather? I'll gather an impression that this fellow is not taking this assignment seriously. Is this a very professional approach? So my point is that if you have been assigned a job, I should get an impression that you are seriously taking up that job. And this includes managing our all the affairs to present our best face forward. So to that extent, I think Anamika, you also need to be careful. I think all these nitty-gritties have to be worked out. I mean, you have prepared a presentation and you are not able to make use of it. This is unfortunate.
So I just got nervous at the moment it is not showing, and I just messed up everything. I prepared it very well, but I just messed up.
So then focus on the key learnings from this failure,
Yes, sir.
isn't it?
Sorry, sir.
So
Sir,
a
sorry from
mistake,
my side also for today. I will remember next time.
a mistake is a mistake if it is repeated twice. Otherwise, it's only a learning experience, isn't it? So we have to reflect on what else I could have done so that I should have given my 100%. So if you have prepared a presentation and you were ready to share it and then you could not share it, or else we have to be ready with a plan B. Okay, if my PPT doesn't work or some problem is there, I will be ready with my free flowing presentation. So what happened in the free flowing presentation, because perhaps you had thought that you will be relying on the written text on your PowerPoint presentation, and when it came to free flowing presentation, somehow the smoothness was not there in the delivery, and you were sort of too worked up in the situation, and because of that you didn't know when your mic should be muted and when it should be unmuted. So many of our informal conversations also reach to others. So all those details have to be worked out. Be relaxed, do some pranayam, some yoga, some relaxing things which so that you are comfortable at peace when you are making a presentation.
Yes, sir.
That would be my suggestion to to all of you who have presented. And trust me, there is no rocket science involved. It is only our ability to get into the details. If I have 5 minutes for presentation, the thumb rule is I should spend 5 hours for my preparation. People who give flawless performance on the stage in a drama, you know it well how many rehearsals they have faced before coming on the stage. So there is no rocket science, and miracles don't happen like this. It is sheer hard work which is evident. 90% of our effectiveness is already set when we come for presentation. Only 10% is visible over here. Okay, now I think today we'll have the concluding session on these schools, and we have already talked about three schools: the classical school, then the behavioral school, and the management science school. But I have already shared this idea also that no school is complete in itself. They look at the problem from one angle. Like, for example, I talked about the scientific management school, or they were looking at the efficiency angle. How can we get maximum output from the minimum output? And the context of this school was that the economy was expanding, mass production was the in thing, and this required a particular approach, and scientific management rose to the occasion. But then came a context in which the economy was not doing well, there was recession in the economy. At that point of time, people realized that it is just not efficiency which matters most, but your ability to, take your people along matters more. So this school focused on, somehow on the human angle of making them feel important. Then again came the third school, which is the management science school. And the context of that school was that all routine problems can be solved through the use of technology. All repetitive problems that management faces. And yes, most of the time we are doing repetitive jobs. For example, I will be teaching for next 30 hours doing the same job using the same technology. Now, every job can be perfected through the use of technology. This was the plank of the management sciences school. And if we are able to use science, operations research, queuing theory, transportation models, whatever techniques that have got evolved in the Second World War, we will be able to solve most of our problems. This was the contention of the management sciences school. But you all know that all these contentions are not complete. They are not wrong, but they are incomplete. So then came the last category of schools. In fact, it cannot be called a school. It can be called the contemporary approaches, because many approaches have been proposed under this category of contemporary school. And I'll mention three of them today in today's class and wind up our discussion on evolution of management theory. The first approach was the contribution of, again, this what is called the systems approach. With the arrival of computers, people started looking at things, at as independent subparts of a system. So every system has its subsystems, and these subsystems, they are interdependent. So, like for example, if we look at our own university, for example, it has three distinct subsystems. You have the academics, and deans are the heads in the academic stream. Then you have the residential side of the university, because ours is a unique university with its residential character. So Dean Students Welfare is the one who heads that stream, and he coordinates with provosts of various halls, the residential halls where most of these students live. And then there is a third subpart, which is, let us say, the administration of the university, which has three key functionaries, namely the registrar, the controller, and the finance officer. So these are the three distinct subparts. Now, what this systems approach says that these subsystems are interrelated and interdependent. What happens in one subsystem impacts the other subsystem. For example, let me recall the mid 90s, when there was heavy overcrowding in the hostels. Now, will it not impact the academics? For example, we used to have classes at 8 a.m. in the morning, and many of the students missed the classes at 8 a.m. And their plea was, the reason that they cited was that there is so much of overcrowding that we are not able to be even, meet our basic needs there, like toilets are occupied. So what happens in the subsystem, and this will have its impact on, let us say, the law and order issues in the university. So this will have an impact on the administration also. So all systems have subsystems, and these subsystems, they are highly interrelated and interdependent. So your job as a management is to look at those interlinkages, and then only you can manage the system well. So this was the first approach which was suggested under the category of contemporary approaches. Now the second approach was what we call the contingency approach or the situational approach. We have got all the tools, but the contingency approach would say there is no best way to manage in a universal way. It is all situation specific. Like, for example, there was a quality expert, Deming was his name. He proposed many ideas. He was basically an American expert, but his ideas did not click there in America. Then he went to Japan, and in Japan, Deming became a rage. Now, how the situation was different? In Japan, people were more receptive. They were more listening. They were, more attuned to listen to ideas. So it was not that his ideas were not worth in America and they were worth in Japan, but the situation was different in two countries. So contingency approach would say that the success of your effort depends. In fact, economists use this term very often. It depends. They would not give a straight answer. Your job is to explain on what it depends. Whether the situation is favorable, or how can you turn the situation favorable, how can you tailor made. So Deming should have learned this art as to how to communicate his ideas to an American audience. So this is what is called the contingency approach. Understand the situation and pitch yourself accordingly.
So are we saying something about adaptability as well over here, that we should
Yes,
adapt according to the environment or the culture?
exactly, exactly. And especially this cultural sensitivity you have pointed out very correctly, in view of the fact that now most of the situations are cross cultural. The cultural sensitivity is the most important element of the situation. And ever since we have started having globalization, this has become even more important, the cultural sensitivity. Now comes the third situation, third school in this broad category of contemporary approaches. This we would call the new human relations school. I am writing it, this term, new HR school. The new HR school, what it says, actually it is a realization that there are some fundamentals which should be set right first. And what is that? Let us understand that. In fact, there have been studies which have been carried out by experts to find out what contributes to enduring success. When I'm also, suggesting, commenting on your performance, I'm focusing on some core ideas always. For example, today I said, ultimately, it is our ability to get into the details. It is the preparation which matters. Now, is it not a universal kind of principle which can be applied to all situations? So, likewise, experts have been trying to understand what are those core ideas which will always play a role in the success of an enterprise or an individual. And the benchmark study on this was conducted in 1980 by two American experts. Their name is Tom Peter and Waterman. In 1980, their book came out. The title of the book was In Search of Excellence. And that was the period when Japanese companies were on the rise and American companies were, given a tough fight by these companies in all sectors, be it auto sector or earth moving equipments, or like, for example, this battle that we had of Xerox and Canon. Xerox was an American company, and Canon came in a big way and gave them a run for their money. So these two experts, Peter and Waterman, Tom Peters and Waterman, they tried to find out, is there something wrong with the American companies? And they found out that there are 43 odd companies who are doing exceedingly well, American companies that are doing exceedingly well, even when the Japanese companies are present there. So he said there is nothing wrong as such in the American way, because if there had been something wrong, these companies too should not have performed well. So it tried to understand what is that they are doing well, and it came up with all the recommendations, all the findings of these 43 excellent companies. They shared in this book, In Search of Excellence, and this book became a rage in early 80s and 90s when it was published. So what they said, that these companies, they have some core characteristics, like for example, they focus on their core competence. They use the term, they stick to their knitting. They don't spread themselves too thinly. One of the element, the other element, they, for example, they pointed out was that these companies are always close to the customer, and they wrote some anecdotal evidence on this account. In fact, one of the researcher, he himself faced the situation. He visited a hotel, and it was mid of the night, and he was not very sure that whether he'll get a room, but he has missed a flight, so he had to get a room on an urgent basis, and he reluctantly walked to the hotel reception and inquired whether he can get a room for that night. And to his surprise, the person on the reception recognized him, that he has stayed in the hotel 5 years back. And he said, "We remember you have been a valued guest, and we welcome you again." So it is this kind of closeness to the customer. And you can imagine, how a person would feel. You are walking to the reception with reluctance whether you will get a room, and you get this kind of response. You will feel elated. So this is another thing which they found, that these companies were truly close to the customer. And likewise, many, they, for example, they said they are very, very rigid as far as some core values are concerned, but very, very flexible with regard to the way things are managed. So these are some of the rules which they proposed should be followed by everyone. And later on, two other researchers uh, uh, also continued these ideas, and one of them is Jim Collins. I would suggest his books to you if you are more intellectually inclined and want to explore this issue deeper. And Jim Collins wrote two books, From Good to Great. This was one of the book, Good to Great, and another one. What is the title of the book is Built to Last. And this is the record of those companies which were good at some stage, and they were doing reasonably good, but at some stage they took a break and they said, being good is not good enough, and we want to be great. And they shifted, or they experienced that transition from just being good, they became great companies. And the second book, Built to Last, is the record of those companies who were great right from the day one. They were built as great companies. So there also the core idea of Jim Collins is that it is possible to become great, and it is possible to be great and remain great. And in the same way, there was another researcher, and a British researcher, Harry D. Hughes is his name. And he was actually a professor, a management professor in London Business School. And he was hired by Shell Company. And this Shell, is a oil company, and it became a 100 years old company in 90s. And when it became a 100 years old company, it sponsored a study. And for that purpose, they hired this professor, Harry D. Hughes, and asked him to study all those companies who have survived for more than 100 years. And there also the core idea was that if a company can survive for more than 100 years, it's an indication that the company must be inherently doing something worthwhile. Then only a company can survive for more than 100 years. And it studied companies like Siemens, for example, which is in existence for more than 500 years. So maybe we have run out of time and we will have. So I will conclude. What is the core that people are getting from this? That is why this title, this broad title which I proposed, the new human relations school. Ultimately, it boils down to the issue of leadership. Such companies are not only managed well but led well. Leadership makes the difference. And these companies have experienced uplifting leadership, which creates a culture where the employees or members of the company, they behave like communities. And there are some shared values which every member of the organization imbibes. So they may change their product profile, they may change their uh, ways of doing things, but they don't change their core values. So ultimately, it all boils down to the soft factors. And that is why I think if I were to conclude this discussion today, they concluded that actually it is the soft which is hard. Values are soft, but they are hard. They bring hard results. Okay. So we conclude here and we'll meet again. Maybe some concluding comments we will reserve for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhavik.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.